Take a deep breath and let's hear a story about Moly, a passionate wildlife photographer who discovered her true calling among the gentle giants of Africa. Moly Matthews had always felt a peculiar emptiness in her life, despite her successful career as a wildlife photographer in Boston. The rhythmic tapping of rain against her apartment window that evening felt like nature's gentle reminder that there was more to discover beyond her comfortable routine. Her apartment walls, adorned with images of exotic wildlife from magazines, seemed to whisper stories of faraway lands that called to her soul. As she sipped her chamomile tea, its warm, honey-sweet aroma filling her nostrils, she scrolled through an email that would change everything, an invitation to document a conservation project in Kenya. The soft glow of her laptop illuminated her face as she read about the elephant sanctuary in need of publicity. She could almost hear the distant trumpeting calls echoing through an African savanna she had yet to experience. The email mentions the sanctuary's mission to protect elephants from poaching and habitat loss, causes that resonated deeply with Moly's passion for wildlife. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before she typed her acceptance, feeling the subtle weight of decision making her movements deliberate and meaningful. Dreams of Africa filled Moly's nights in the weeks before her departure, her subconscious painting landscapes of golden grasslands swaying in warm breezes. She would wake with the lingering sensation of African soil beneath her feet and the earthy scent of baobab trees in her imagination. Each morning she'd enjoy her breakfast on her small balcony, watching the city slowly awaken as she mentally prepared for the journey ahead. The anticipation built like a soft, pleasant humming beneath her skin, making even mundane preparations feel significant and purposeful. The flight to Nairobi was long, but Moly hardly noticed as she gazed out the window at cloud formations that resembled the animals she hoped to encounter. When sleep finally came, it was deep and restful, rocking gently with the rhythm of the aircraft. Upon landing, the first thing that struck her was the quality of light, golden, warm, and somehow more vibrant than she had ever experienced. The air carried unfamiliar spices and flora, an intoxicating mixture that filled her lungs with each breath. Greeted by Daniel, the sanctuary's coordinator, with kind eyes and a smile that crinkled the edges of his weathered face, Moly felt immediately at ease. His voice, a melodious baritone with traces of a British colonial education, narrated stories of the sanctuary as they drove through landscapes that shifted from urban bustle to rural tranquility. The Jeep bumped along dusty roads, each jolt a reminder that she was traveling farther from the familiar and deeper into her new adventure. Wildlife began to appear along the roadside. Gazelles with delicate legs, baboons with curious eyes, and birds with plumage so colorful they seemed unreal. The sanctuary itself was nestled in a valley protected by gentle hills, a haven of greenery in the sometimes harsh African landscape. As Moly stepped from the vehicle, the first sounds that greeted her were the distant, low rumbles of elephants communicating with one another. The vibrations seemed to resonate in her chest, connecting her instantly to these magnificent creatures before she even saw them. The air was fresher here, filled with the scent of sun-warmed earth and vegetation, creating an atmosphere of natural peace that immediately soothed her travel-weary body. Moly's accommodation was a modest but comfortable cabin with a porch that overlooked a watering hole frequented by the sanctuary's elephants. The wooden structure seemed to breathe with the landscape, its windows allowing in breezes that carried the day's heat away as evening approached. Her first night was spent sitting on that porch, wrapped in a soft blanket against the surprising coolness of the African night, watching stars appear in a sky untainted by city lights. The unfamiliar constellations twinkled like diamonds scattered across velvet, a celestial welcome to her new temporary home. Morning arrived with a symphony of bird calls that gently pulled Moly from deep slumber. Soft golden light filtered through the gauzy curtains, painting patterns on the wooden floor that seemed to dance as the fabric moved in the breeze. Her first day would begin with an orientation to the sanctuary and its residents, both human and elephant. The anticipation made her movements deliberate as she prepared, savoring the rich aroma of Kenyan coffee provided by the sanctuary staff. Its flavor was earthy and complex, unlike anything she'd tasted back home. Meeting the elephant herd for the first time left Moly breathless with wonder and respect. Led by Zuri, the sanctuary's head caretaker, she approached cautiously, aware of her status as a newcomer to these perceptive animals. The matriarch of the herd, an elderly female named Nima with tusks that curved gracefully toward the ground, regarded Moly with eyes that held wisdom accumulated through decades of life on the savannah. Zuri explained how each elephant had a story, often one of rescue from trauma, and yet retained a capacity for trust and affection that seemed miraculous. Nima's granddaughter, a playful 3-year-old named Kibo, was the first to approach Moly, her trunk extending curiously to investigate this new human. The sensation of that trunk, surprisingly soft and dexterous, as it gently explored Moly's hand, sent a shiver of delight through her that settled into profound joy. Kibo's warm breath against her palm was like being acknowledged by an ancient spirit, an acceptance that brought unexpected tears to Moly's eyes. The connection was instantaneous and powerful, transcending species with its pure simplicity. Days at the sanctuary followed a rhythm dictated by the needs of the elephants rather than arbitrary human schedules. Moly found herself rising with the sun, its first rays warming her skin as she joined the caretakers for morning health checks on the herd. She learned to notice subtle signs of an elephant's mood, the set of their ears, the movement of their trunk, the rumbles too low for human ears to detect, but felt through the ground beneath her feet. Her camera captured these moments of connection and care, images more powerful than any she had taken before. The sanctuary staff became a kind of family, sharing meals around a communal table under a canopy of stars each evening. Conversations flowed easily, stories exchanged over simple but delicious food prepared with local ingredients that exploded with flavor on her palate. Moly found herself laughing more frequently than she had in years. The sound carried away on night breezes scented with wood smoke and wild jasmine. She would fall into bed each night pleasantly exhausted, muscles aching from physical work, but her spirit more fulfilled than ever before. Learning to care for the elephants became Moly's primary focus, her photography secondary to the hands-on experience of nurturing these gentle giants. She mastered the preparation of specialized feed for different elephants, more greens for elderly Nima, fruit treats for growing Kibo, medicinal supplements for those recovering from injuries or illness. The rhythmic chopping of vegetation became meditative, the fresh plant scents coating her hands with a green perfume that lingered pleasantly throughout the day. Each task, no matter how mundane, felt purposeful when connected to the well-being of creatures she had grown to love. As weeks passed, Moly's connection with the elephant herd deepened in ways she hadn't imagined possible. She became attuned to their individual personalities. Nima's protective wisdom, Kibo's boundless curiosity, the shy gentleness of Jabari, a young male rescued after witnessing his mother's poaching. Each morning, the elephants would trumpet a greeting when they spotted her approaching, a sound that vibrated through the air and into her heart. The recognition in their intelligent eyes when they saw her made each day's sunrise more beautiful than the last. Daniel began to trust Moly with more responsibilities, including accompanying the anti-poaching patrols that protected the sanctuary's boundaries. These expeditions took her deeper into the wilderness, where the landscape shifted between thorny acacia woodlands and open grasslands that swayed like golden oceans in the breeze. The rangers taught her to read tracks in the dust, to notice disturbed vegetation and other signs of human intrusion. Their vigilance was constant, but calm, a necessity in a region where elephants were still hunted for their ivory, despite international prohibitions. One particularly hot afternoon, while monitoring a remote section of the sanctuary, Moly and two rangers discovered fresh tracks that didn't belong to sanctuary personnel. The rangers' expressions grew serious as they conferred in low voices, their usual good humor replaced by professional focus. They followed the trail cautiously, moving through the brush with a silence Moly struggled to imitate, her heart pounding not with fear, but with protective instinct for the elephants she had come to consider under her guardianship. The thought of anyone threatening them filled her with a quiet determination she hadn't known she possessed. The tracks led to an abandoned campsite where the poachers had clearly fled, perhaps warned by lookouts about the approaching patrol. Evidence of their intentions remained: wire snares, ammunition, and tools for removing tusks that made Moly's stomach clench with revulsion. The rangers methodically documented and collected the materials as evidence, their movements efficient through years of similar discoveries. That night at dinner, the mood was somber, as Daniel explained that poaching attempts had increased in the region, putting additional pressure on the sanctuary's limited resources. Moly lay awake that night, listening to the distant rumbles of elephants and the closer symphony of insects outside her window. An idea began to form, growing from a small seed of thought into something with potential. Her photography skills and connections could perhaps be leveraged to bring more attention to the sanctuary's work and the ongoing threats to these magnificent animals. The gentle rhythm of night sounds became the backdrop to her planning. Each cricket chirp and frog call like affirmations of her emerging purpose. By morning, the outline of a fundraising campaign had crystallized in her mind. With Daniel's enthusiastic support, Moly began documenting daily life at the sanctuary with new focus. Her camera captured not just the majesty of the elephants, but the dedication of their human protectors, Zuri bottle-feeding an orphaned calf at dawn, rangers trudging through miles of difficult terrain in all weather conditions, researchers collecting data to better understand elephant behavior and needs. She photographed the contrast between the peaceful existence at the sanctuary and the brutal reality of poaching's aftermath. Images powerful enough to move viewers to action without exploiting the animal's dignity. As she worked, Moly became particularly drawn to the story of Jabari, the young male elephant who had witnessed his mother's killing. Unlike some of the other rescued elephants who had adjusted well to sanctuary life, Jabari remained somewhat withdrawn, often standing apart from the herd, his eyes holding a wariness that broke Moly's heart. Zuri explained that male elephants typically leave their maternal herds as adolescents, but that Jabari's trauma had left him caught between independence and need for family protection. His struggle resonated with something in Moly, a familiar feeling of being between worlds, belonging fully to neither. On a misty morning when the landscape was softened by gentle rain, Moly sat sketching under a shelter near the elephant's favorite acacia grove. The sound of raindrops created a soothing percussion on the thatch roof, occasionally punctuated by the soft rumbles of nearby elephants. She hadn't noticed Jabari approaching until his shadow fell across her sketchbook, his massive form blocking the diffused light. Time seemed suspended as they regarded each other, human and elephant, neither moving in a moment of perfect stillness. Then, with delicate precision that belied his size, Jabari extended his trunk toward her drawing. The feel of his breath on the page stirred the paper, as if bringing her sketched elephants to life. Moly remained motionless, barely breathing herself, as Jabari's trunk moved from the sketchbook to her hand, then to her face in the gentlest of touches. The scent of him, earth and vegetation, and something uniquely elephant, enveloped her senses as his inspection continued, unhurried and thorough. When he finally stepped back, maintaining eye contact with her, Moly felt something shift within her consciousness, as if a door had opened to a deeper understanding of connection beyond species. That evening, she shared the experience with Daniel and Zuri, her voice soft with wonder, as the three sat around a small fire. The flames cast dancing shadows across their faces as they discussed what the interaction might mean for Jabari's healing process. Zuri, whose knowledge of elephant behavior was built on decades of observation, suggested that Jabari had chosen to initiate contact, a significant step for an elephant who had kept emotional distance, even from his own kind. The crackle of burning wood punctuated their conversation, sparks rising occasionally toward the star-filled sky in tiny meteors of orange light. News came the following week of a particularly active poaching ring operating just beyond the sanctuary's boundaries. The information arrived with Joseph, a senior ranger who had connections in surrounding villages and served as liaison between the sanctuary and local communities. His normally cheerful face was grave as he described intelligence suggesting a planned incursion into sanctuary territory within days. The staff gathered in the main building, rain drumming steadily on the roof as if in counterpoint to the tension in the room. Plans were made to increase patrols and move vulnerable elephants deeper into protected areas. Moly volunteered to join the team responsible for relocating the herd, a task requiring patience and understanding of elephant family dynamics. The matriarch, Nima, would need to lead willingly for the others to follow, especially the younger elephants who might be easily frightened by changes in routine. Early the next morning, as mist rose from the ground in ethereal wisps, Moly joined Zuri and other handlers in the gentle process of encouragement rather than force. They used familiar voice commands and food rewards, working with the elephant's intelligence rather than against their formidable strength. The sound of the herd moving through morning dew-dampened grass created a gentle swishing melody. As they traveled through territory less frequented by the elephants, Moly noticed changes in their behavior, raised trunks testing unfamiliar scents, ears spread wide to catch every sound, the protective formation they naturally assumed with youngest members at the center. Jabari surprised the handlers by taking a position at the rear of the group, typically the place for protective adult males, despite his youth. His posture had changed, shoulders squared and head higher, as if he had found purpose in guarding the others. The transformation brought a lump to Moly's throat as she walked beside him, her camera documenting this moment of his evolution from victim to protector. They reached the designated safe area by mid-afternoon, a secluded valley with abundant water and vegetation where the elephants could remain until the threat had passed. The journey had been tiring but uneventful. each elephant responding well to the guidance of their human companions. As the herd began to explore their temporary home, trunks reaching for unfamiliar plants and water splashing as calves discovered a shallow pool, the handlers withdrew to establish an observation camp on higher ground. The valley below them unfolded in shades of green and gold, dotted with the gray forms of their charges settling into their new surroundings. Dawn broke over the valley with streaks of pink and gold painting the sky, nature's artistry reflected in the still waters where elephants already gathered to drink. Moly awoke to these colors filtering through her tent, the canvas glowing like a lantern in the early light. The air held the particular freshness of morning in wild places, crisp and filled with possibility. As she emerged, stretching muscles sore from the previous day's journey, a sense of profound rightness settled over her, a feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be, doing precisely what she was born to do. The realization was as gentle as the morning itself, arriving without fanfare, but with absolute certainty. Word came via radio that the anti-poaching team had successfully intercepted the poachers before they entered sanctuary land. No shots had been fired. The presence of well-equipped rangers had been enough to send the would-be hunters fleeing. The relief among the staff was palpable as they shared breakfast, the tension of recent days dissolving into quiet celebration. Savoring a cup of tea that tasted sweeter for the good news, Moly watched sunlight strengthen across the landscape, turning dewdrops on grass stems into countless tiny prisms that scattered rainbow light. The simple beauty of this moment, safety, community, purpose, filled her with a gratitude so intense it bordered on euphoria. Over the next few days, as the elephants adapted to their temporary home, Moly noticed a change in Jabari. He spent more time with a small group of young males, engaging in the trunk wrestling and sparring that built skills needed for adult life. His eyes held less sadness when they met hers during her daily observations. Zuri, watching the transformation with the satisfaction of someone who had seen many traumatized elephants heal, explained that having a purpose protecting the herd during their relocation had awakened Jabari's natural instincts and connections. Sometimes, she said, the deepest healing came not from being protected, but from finding the strength to protect others. When it was deemed safe to return to the main sanctuary, the journey back felt like a victory procession. The elephants moved with confidence, familiar now with the route and trusting in their human guides. Moly walked beside Nima, the elderly matriarch whose wisdom had kept the herd calm during their displacement. The rhythm of their footfalls created a soothing percussion against the earth, a sound Moly knew she would carry in her memory long after she left Africa. Overhead, a formation of birds wheeled against the blue sky, their freedom echoing the lightness in her heart as they approached the sanctuary that had become home. As the weeks passed and her scheduled departure grew closer, Moly completed her photography project, creating a visual narrative that captured both the beauty of the elephants and the challenges they faced. Her images showed the intelligence in their eyes, the tenderness between mothers and calves, the playfulness of adolescence, and the dignity of the elders. She documented the dedication of the sanctuary staff, the communities who had chosen conservation over exploitation, and the landscapes that sustained them all. When she shared the final collection with Daniel and the team, their emotional response told her she had captured something true and important. The fundraising campaign exceeded everyone's expectations, Moly's photographs and accompanying stories touching hearts across continents. Donations flowed in, allowing the sanctuary to purchase additional land as buffer zone, hire more rangers, and expand their community education programs. Daniel's voice broke with emotion during a video call, informing Moly that they had secured enough funding to establish a specialized veterinary unit, a dream long deferred by financial constraints. The knowledge that her work had tangible impact filled Moly with a quiet pride, unlike any she had felt from previous professional success. This was purpose aligned with passion, head with heart. On her final evening at the sanctuary, the staff organized a special dinner under the stars, the air filled with the scent of traditional dishes prepared in her honor. Lanterns cast a golden glow over the gathering, illuminating faces that had become dear to her in ways she hadn't anticipated when she first arrived. Stories and laughter flowed as freely as the local honey wine, memories shared of moments both challenging and beautiful. The night pulsed with the sounds of Africa, distant hyena calls, the persistent chorus of insects, and the occasional low rumble of elephants communicating beyond human hearing, range but felt in the soul. As a surprise, Yuri had arranged for Moly to spend one last sunrise with the herd before her departure. In the pearly pre-dawn light, they walked together to the watering hole where elephants gathered each morning. Mist hovered over the surface of the water, creating an ethereal atmosphere as elephant shapes emerged from the dimness. The air was cool against Moly's skin, but warmed gradually as light strengthened, bringing definition to the landscape. No words were needed between her and Zuri. They simply stood in companionable silence, witnessing the day's beginning alongside beings who had existed on this continent for millions of years. Nima and Kibo approached them first, followed by several other females and their young. Last came Jabari, walking with newfound confidence, his posture relaxed yet dignified. Each elephant greeted Moly in turn, trunks gently exploring her familiar scent as she whispered her goodbyes. When Jabari reached her, he paused longer than the others, his wise eyes meeting hers in what felt like perfect understanding. The morning light caught in the moisture of his eyes, transforming it to amber brilliance. Moly placed her hand on his trunk in a final connection, feeling the warmth and strength of him flow into her memory. Driving away from the sanctuary later that day, Moly watched the landscape pass by her window, each vista now layered with memories and meanings invisible to casual observers. The same road that had seemed so foreign on her arrival now felt intimate and known, each curve and landmark part of a story she had lived rather than merely witnessed. Daniel, accompanying her to the airport, respected her reflective mood, speaking only occasionally to point out a particularly beautiful bird or to share a final thought about the sanctuary's future plans. The space between them was comfortable, filled with mutual respect and shared purpose, rather than needing to be filled with conversation. At the airport, their farewell was brief but heartfelt. Daniel's weathered hands clasped hers firmly as he thanked her not just for her photography, but for bringing her whole heart to their mission. The words, "You will always have a place here," were offered simply but with sincere meaning. As Moly walked toward her gate, she felt none of the anticipated sadness of departure, only a peaceful certainty that this was not an ending but a turning point. Her steps were light despite the weight of her camera equipment, her mind already sketching plans for her return as a permanent sanctuary staff member rather than a visitor. On the flight home, watching Africa recede beneath her, Moly reflected on how completely her life had changed in a few short months. She had arrived seeking photographs and found purpose instead, had looked for stories and discovered her own. The gentle hum of the aircraft engines created a soothing backdrop for her thoughts, which drifted between practical considerations of ending her lease and more profound contemplations about following one's true calling. Sleep came easily, dreams filled with elephant wisdom and African sunlight, her body traveling homeward while her heart remained with the gentle giants who had taught her so much. Boston greeted her with familiar sights and sounds that now seemed slightly foreign, as if she were seeing her former life through new eyes. The bustle of the city, once energizing, now felt unnecessarily frenetic compared to the purposeful rhythms of the sanctuary. Her apartment, unchanged in her absence, seemed filled with possessions that had lost their importance. As she unpacked her equipment and began the process of editing her final photographs, Moly composed emails, resignation from her current position, applications to conservation organizations that could use her skills, and most importantly, acceptance of Daniel's offer to return to the sanctuary in a permanent capacity. With each decision, a sense of rightness settled over her, like the warm African sun she already missed. 3 months later, Moly stood once again at the entrance to the elephant sanctuary, this time not as a visitor, but as its new communications director. The morning air welcomed her with familiar scents of earth and vegetation, the distant calls of birds and rumbles of elephants, creating the soundtrack she had missed every day of her absence. Daniel and Zuri waited to greet her, their faces breaking into wide smiles at her arrival. Behind them, as if aware of the significance of the moment, the elephant herd had gathered at the edge of their enclosure. Moly could have sworn that Nima nodded her massive head in approval, while Jabari's trunk raised in what looked remarkably like a wave. Home, she thought, is not always where you began, but where you finally recognize yourself. And with that knowledge warming her heart, Moly stepped forward into her new life among the gentle giants of Africa.